welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very powerful show coming right up with special guest Roger Housden, and he's here to talk to us about his new book, 10 Poems for Difficult Times. Now, Roger is the author to the best-selling 10 Poems series, which began in 2001 with 10 Poems to Change Your Life. He offers writing workshops, both live and online, with an emphasis on self-discovery and exploration. So let's welcome to the show, Roger.
Marianne, thank you so much for inviting me.
What a pleasure it is to have you here, and my goodness, can't we all use your book right now, right?
Probably yes, I hope so.
Yeah, even more than ever, I think. It's interesting because, you and I know that books take such a period of time to come to fruition, and then once they do, it's interesting how the timing, in the case of your book, is just perfect.
Yeah, timing is probably one of the most important ingredients for any work of art, actually, but certainly for books, yes. And we are in difficult times, and of course, difficult times are both collective and personal. So, our thoughts may go to the world at the moment and this country at the moment. But also, of course, each of us in our own way at different times have difficult times. I did this book really with the intention of addressing both the collective and our personal situation.
Well, and so was that part of the inspiration behind this book? Was just, helping people to kind of walk through these times, because they seem to be more difficult than most people, have experienced in the past.
Well, two thoughts about that. The first thought is, the first point is that actually, the inspiration for this book came in November 2016. In other words, the election. And like so many people, I wondered how I could respond to the new state of affairs. We all do what we can in our own way. And for me, I was just walking in the woods very soon after the election, and the title, very often this happens for me, the title of a book comes before I even know what it's about. And, I was shrouded, as most people were, in the feelings, the cloud of that election, and suddenly out of that, while I was walking in the woods, came this title, 10 Poems for Difficult Times. And I've written a whole series of books called 10 Poems, a 10 poem series, but I didn't imagine that I'd be doing another one. I haven't done one for several years. But as soon as that title appeared in my mind, I knew that's what I had to do. So that was my response primarily to where we are now collectively, and especially the first poem of the book, which came out actually in June of 2016, but had the most extraordinary timing to put wind in its sails. That poem is called Good Bones by Maggie Smith, which I can read if you like. But,
that would be lovely. Yes, of course.
Yeah. You realize why this is the first poem in the book. Maggie Smith is not known generally as a poet. I mean, she is a poet. She lives in Ohio. She was in the local Starbucks in Ohio, somewhere near her home. She was a mother with 2 children, And she was sitting in Starbucks. She started writing the first line of a poem, and the first line actually is, "Life is short, though I keep this from my children." The rest of the poem flowed pretty easily from there. So by the time she left the coffee shop, she had a whole new piece of work that had come out whole. So that was then, and her poem was published in a small online journal called Waxwing. And around the same time, in June 2016, a gunman killed 49 people at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, Florida. And this poem went viral. Let me read it first, and then I'll come back to what happened to it. Mm-hmm. So this is called Good Bones. The poet is Maggie Smith. Life is short, though I keep this from my children. Life is short, and I've shortened mine in 1,000 delicious, ill-advised ways. 1,000 deliciously ill-advised ways I'll keep from my children. The world is at least 50% terrible, and that's a conservative estimate, though I keep this from my children. For every bird, there is a stone thrown at a bird. For every loved child, a child broken, bagged, sunk in a lake. Life is short, and the world is at least half terrible, and for every kind stranger, there is one who will break you. Though I keep this from my children, I am trying to sell them the world. Any decent realtor, walking you through a real shithole, chirps on about good bones. This place could be beautiful, right? You could make this place beautiful. That's a wonderful poem. Yeah. And someone posted a screenshot of that poem on Facebook. A Brooklyn-based musician read it, passed it along on Twitter, and suddenly, within a week or so, articles about the poem appeared in the Guardian newspaper, Slate, and all kinds of places, helping spread the poem worldwide. And since then, this is amazing, since then, that poem has been interpreted by a dance troupe in India, turned into a musical score for the voice and harp, and translated into Spanish, Italian, French, Korean, Hindi, Tamil, Telugu, and Malayalam. Suddenly, Maggie Smith, who was not known at all, finds herself an international celebrity. So that's pretty good timing for a poem like this to come out after that massacre in Orlando. But that was June of 2016, and then in November, when the election happened, this poem went viral all over again. So, it's the first one in this poem, in this book, 10 Poems for Difficult Times. And she was not actually writing in order to address a specific situation in the world. She was actually writing as a mother, for her children, thinking about her children. What kind of world are we going to be leaving the next generation or later generations? And those last 2 or 3 lines really said it all. She's trying to sell them the world, right? Any decent realtor chirps on about good bones. This place could be beautiful, right? You could make this place beautiful. Yeah. So, I I was actually, I'm not really smoking regarding for her children. I was prompted to write this book, create this book, as a result of the election of 2016.
Well, it's easy to see why you selected Good Bones by Maggie Smith as the first poem to go in this book, and I really appreciate what you've written afterward that kind of talks not just about the poem and what the poem's looking to bring forward, but also some of your thoughts on it.
Yeah, that's really for me, the poetry of these 10 poems in this book, and in previous 10 poems books. The poems for me are doorways into the real subject, the real theme, which is, our human condition and how we're engaging with it at this time. And so I use these poems as a doorway for me myself to explore different themes around essentially the existential human condition. How do we respond to pain and difficulty? What is the place of joy in a troubled world? So these kind of questions, I address personally. In the essays that follow each of the poem, each poem, I write an essay as an exploration of the poem, but even more as an exploration of the themes that I see that it raises.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you talk about poetry being profoundly necessary in these times. And it's not until you read that poem and your readers are picking up these books in your book, 10 Poems for Difficult Times, and reading this that they can actually feel why this is so important.
Yes, and you touched something on there actually tangentially, which is that a poem really does ask to be read aloud. So I just read that poem aloud, and then you get it in a way far more than just reading it on the page. So because when a poem is read aloud by yourself or by someone else, it's being brought alive by the breath of that person, by the presence and the feeling of that particular person, who may be yourself, but very likely to be yourself. And so I actually do encourage people when they have a poem before them to speak it out loud to themselves, whether they're alone or with anyone else, because it gives the poem that extra sense of life, which really passes on its meaning more directly to us. Yeah. A poem is language's way of condensing into a fine essence the most central part of what we need to say. Every word in a poem matters. You can also think that every word in a conversation matters, but that's not usually the case. But every word in a poem does matter, and is placed where it is in the line for a particular effect. And really, the underlying point of poetry is that it reminds us, it strikes us as, actually, as John Keats, the Romantic poet, said, it strikes us as a wording of our own highest thoughts. So the poem is not necessarily telling us something we didn't know. It's actually reminding us of something that we may not have had the words for, but we can intuit, we can maybe always felt for ourselves, but not put into words, and a poem can appear and we can say, yes, that's it exactly.
Really allow us to have time to reflect on what these words mean. And I love poetry for that reason. And you brought it up so well, and how each word means something. And when we sit and take time to dig into what those meanings are and reflect on them, it's a powerful statement in itself.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And there's also the sense that poems are this humanizing influence that Kate speaks of. And I think this is so because they connect us deeply with others, with many others, not just the poet who's written the poem, but other readers who see themselves in the poem that we may be reading. A poem, if it's a good poem, very often it arises out of the personal experience of the poet, but is so well constructed and so well experienced by the poet themselves that it takes on a universal sense. So, the more truly individually we're able to express ourselves, then the more deeply what we are saying, whether actually the poem or in any way, what we are saying becomes a universal statement. So we reach the universal through being most true to our own personal experience, and in the case of a poet, being able to articulate that in language.
Well, and for our listeners that are kind of just diving into this, why don't you share with us a little bit about the meaning of the word poet?
Yeah, the word poet is actually connected. It means at root a maker, someone who makes, creates, constructs. And not that the word maker is connected etymologically to words like magic, matrix. So this actually has the same etymological root as those words, matrix, magic, maker. And if you think about it, good poetry really is something that actually seduces us, but draws us, enchants us with its sound, rhythm, and language. So poetry is a form of magic, actually. It lulls us and it lets our heart and our mind rise and fall, along with the cadences of the language, and it entrains us into a mood, a frequency, an energy, if you like, that is conjured by the words and the images. So poetry is a form of magic, actually, and all good art is a form of magic that enchants us into another way of seeing both ourselves and the world itself. And as I say in the introduction, the more refined the energy of that poem is, the more actually it can raise us, the reader, to the best that we are in ourselves. Which is another reason that poetry, I think, is something that is so vital to culture.
I would agree, and you talk about how poetry, just kind of revitalizes our imagination, and that imagination is kind of like under attack today. And how is that so?
Well, I think there are many reasons for that. But first, let me just say a word about what I mean anyway about imagination. I don't mean fantasy. That is, things that are made up in the head, in the mind. That fantasy, whereas imagination is more of an intuitive capacity that connects us with different ways of seeing than we normally experience. So I could see it as an intuitive rather than a mental faculty, imagination. And imagination has always been nourished really by the most ordinary, everyday things. Nature, for sure. I mean, how many poems or books are inspired by nature? Nature in all of its forms. Conversation is another thing that has always inspired imaginative, intuitive insights. And in the last 20 years, certainly, we've become more and more saturated, and we hear a lot about this right now, of course, with, both false and genuine information. And we find it a challenge to tell the difference. We're saturated with concepts, opinions, through our Twitter feed, our Facebook account, and social media in general, and all the kinds of media with which we're deluged. All of that really takes our attention from the concrete, everyday reality of tree roots, barking dogs, children crying, any one of those concrete facts can spark the imagination, and it can begin a whole novel. But we live more and more now in an abstract world, a meta world really, which is divorced from concrete reality, not connected with it. So I think this does have a real effect on that intuitive, imaginative faculty. And part of the imagination is that which really does give us the sense and the experience that we're not alone, that we actually really are part of a living universe. Not only part of the human race, but part of this earth and this living world. And that's an imaginative leap. Not as a concept, that can be spoken of as a concept, but to actually really have the felt sense that we are part of the living world. That's part of the imaginative faculty. And it's through that we're able to dissolve the sense of our own isolation and separateness. And as that possibility becomes less and less available, I think what happens in consequence is that the sense of isolation and alienation only grows. And I think we're experiencing this in our culture.
Yes, I would agree with you on that, because a lot of times that's one of the number one complaints I hear when people come on and they talk about, we need to deal with loneliness or people feeling isolated or disconnected. Those are some of the main topics that a lot of times people want to address.
Yeah. The more and of course, the abstract world of the internet has enormous value as well. So it's not to diminish or sideline that fact, I mean, after all, it's pretty useful that you can just, someone can ask you a question, you say, just a minute, I'll just ask Google. There's the answer to almost everything. But that is information. And information, of course, is invaluable actually. But as the poet William Carlos Williams said somewhere, what poetry offers is not information. It's actually an experience, a full experience of life, which is different. And people read the news every day and die from the lack of what is found there. And what is found, the lack is precisely that which you can find which is supplied by something like poetry or great literature, for that matter, which is a sense of felt connection with the world, which information by itself cannot give.
I would agree with you. I mean, the first time I came in contact with Shakespeare and had it broken down and went through each verse by each verse, I mean, it stays with you for the rest of your life. It is an experience, more so than most people think that poetry would offer.
Yeah, but isn't that an amazing thing? There was some guy in England 400 years ago who wrote something that stays with you now in 2018. So this is what I mean by the universal. That, where he is speaking out of his own insight and experience, and you, 400 years later, and people all over the world, feel connected to that. They understand that. They can feel and sense what is being imparted there. And I'd just like to return actually to something you said in the beginning, because your comment about Shakespeare reminds me, where you suggested that, today maybe times are more difficult than they've ever been. I'm not sure I'd agree with that actually. I think that if we really think historically, life has always been difficult. In fact, life has been way more difficult than it is today. Certainly in Shakespeare's time, in England, in the place he was working and writing, there were enormous social pressures that had to be contended with, quite apart from disease and illness and short life expectancy and all of that. England at the time of Shakespeare was really nothing less than a police state. Queen Elizabeth, essentially had to be, and rightly so, understandably so, extremely concerned about the Catholics, because the Catholics were essentially potential gateway for Spain and France to invade England. So her response essentially was to have spies on every corner, absolutely everywhere. It was a police state. We forget that now. But Shakespeare was writing under those circumstances. So life has always been tough. and people have always, come up with, they've always created the most remarkable things in spite of it all. In spite of life being as tough as it is, as it has been. So the same is true. There are dark clouds in the sky now, and this is not the first time.
Well, I can see that, I guess, when you look at perspective and when people view the time they're going through, it could seem like the time we're having now is more difficult than anything anyone's ever had before. That could be a very limiting view, and I understand that.
Yeah.
Well, and so So when it came to choosing these fabulous poems, you have 10 of them, how was it that you decided which ones would be included in your book?
Well, they have to strike me like like a hot iron on the back of the neck or something, you know. They really need to be struck in that way. Some of these poems I knew already, and I just knew they were perfect for this subject. Others, like the bones, actually, others I just came across almost by happenstance. You know, when the antenna are out for a certain theme or subject or thing, really, somehow things land on your doorstep. It's amazing how that happens. Again, that's a sense of connectedness that becomes evident like that, you know. It seems like coincidence that something appears, you know, in my email inbox one day, but, you know, it's all of a piece. So, really the important thing was they really struck me. And the other thing was I did want to span the width and breadth of both collective and personal issues. So there are several poems, or 3 poems in the book which do, like good poems, address our collective situation and memories and how to respond to it. And there are others, like the second poem by Ellen Bass, for whom knows, that directly address, you know, in her case, in that case, grief, you know, which all of us experience at some time or other, at one level or another, because inevitably we lose people and things. And so her poem directly addresses that in a very personal way, which I think many of us can relate to. So that was another kind of organizing factor that the book would cover both collective and personal experience.
Like Good Bones by Maggie Smith, what is another poem that really, I know it'd be like trying to choose a favorite child, but really has stood out for you?
Oh gosh, I mean, yes, every single one of these poems really, as I said, hit me over the head. So, gosh, I could choose almost only one. But yeah, here's one by Jack Gilbert. This is poem number 8. And it's called A Brief for the Defense. Now, I'll read this if you like.
Yes, that'd be fabulous.
Yeah. Now, when he says a brief for the defense, it sounds like a lawyer, and it is. And what he's defending here is our right to joy in spite of everything. Okay? So here's the poem. It's called A Brief for the Defense. Sorrow everywhere, slaughter everywhere. If babies are not starving someplace, they're starving somewhere else, with flies in their nostrils. But we enjoy our lives, because that's what God wants. Otherwise, the mornings before summer dawn would not be made so fine. The Bengal tiger would not be fashioned so miraculously well. The poor women at the fountain are laughing together between the suffering they have known and the awfulness in their future. Smiling and laughing while somebody in the village is very sick. There is laughter every day in the terrible streets of Calcutta. And the women laugh in the cages of Bombay. If we deny our happiness, resist our satisfaction, we lessen the importance of their deprivation. We must risk delight. We can do without pleasure, but not delight, not enjoyment. We must have the stubbornness to accept our gladness in the ruthless furnace of this world. To make injustice the only measure of our attention is to praise the devil. If the locomotive of the Lord runs us down, we should give thanks. Thanks that the end had magnitude. We must admit there will be music despite everything. We stand at the prow again of a small ship, anchored late at night in the tiny port, looking over to the sleeping island. The waterfront is 3 shuttered cafes and 1 naked light burning. To hear the faint sound of oars in the silence as a rowboat comes slowly out and then goes back is truly worth all the years of sorrow that are to come. A brief defense.
Wow. That's profound.
So let me just read 2 or 3 of the 3 or 4 of those lines again. So you just remember what he's saying here. If we deny our happiness, resist our satisfaction, we lessen the importance of their deprivation. We must risk delight. We can do without pleasure, but not delight, not enjoyment. We must have the stubbornness to accept our gladness in the ruthless furnace of this world. To make injustice the only measure of our attention is to praise the devil. If the locomotive of the Lord runs us down, we should give thanks that the end had magnitude. We must admit, there will be music despite everything. That last line I just read, there will be music despite everything, reminds me of Sarajevo in the 1990s, when Sarajevo was being besieged by the Serbs, and the Sarajevo orchestra would come out in spite of the snipers into the central city square every day and play.
It's just amazing what, the human spirit can endure.
Isn't it? Yeah.
By far. And that poem has so much, and you've done so well to not only break down some of the things that people would have questions for and elaborate on parts of the discussion on it, but to make it so that people can really understand what the deeper meaning of the poem is. And I really appreciate that you have that for each of these poems, because sometimes when you listen to some of these different lines and you're kind of going, gosh, what is the possibility of what's that mean,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
With that, is this one of the poems that also is just really, I know you say they've had to hit you, has it really touched your heart?
Every one of these has touched my heart. That was the prerequisite, really, for these poems to come into this book. Absolutely. And that poem I've just read sent shivers through my bones, really.
Yeah, it does the same thing too when you read it. And I just love how you read the poetry, because it adds just another layer of meaning to it. And I love how you think that, you express how people should read this out loud, because it really does, it is an experience.
It is, absolutely, yeah. Would you like me to read one last poem before we go?
Oh, kidding? Of course. This is a treat.
Yeah. Well, I've read a couple of poems now that is a brief defense and good poems that really speak to the collective. And here's a poem by someone who was writing in the early 20s, in the 1930s mostly, Conrad Aiken, who's not really read so much now. But this poem is called The Quarrel, and it's about something we've all experienced at one time or another, which is a quarrel with our partner or mother or husband or wife, to friends even. It's about the quarrel. Suddenly, after the quarrel, when we waited, disheartened, silent, with downcast looks, nor stirred eyelid nor finger, hopeless both, yet hoping against all hope to unsay the sundering word, while all the wound's stillness deepened about us, and each of us crept his thoughts' way to discover how, with as little sound as the fall of a leaf, the shadow had fallen. A lover quarrelled with lover. And now, in the quiet, I marvelled, alas, at your deep beauty, your tragic beauty, torn as the pale flower is torn by the wanton sparrow. This beauty pitied and loved, and now forsworn, it was then when the instant darkened to its darkest, when faith was lost with hope, and the rain conspired to strike its grey arpeggios against our heartstrings, when love no longer dared and scarcely desired, it was then that suddenly, in the neighbour's room, the music started. That brave quartet of strings, breaking out of the stillness, as out of our stillness, like the indomitable heart of life that sings when all is lost. And startled from our sorrow, tranced from our grief by that diviner grief, we raised remembering eyes. Each looked at the other, blinded with tears of joy. And another leaf fell silently as that first. And in the instant, the shadow had gone. Our quarrel became absurd, and we rose to the angelic voices of the music, and I touched your hand, and we kissed without a word.
What a beautiful poem. That one is a stunning one.
It is, they all are.
I feel like you have them all just perfectly picked for this book. And so, what you lead to me to, like, one of my next questions here, what would you like the reader to take away from your book 10 Poems for Difficult Times?
I would like them to take away the fact that they are not alone, that others all over the world have felt and do feel as they do, and they have done. And I would also like to remind them of those few lines from a brief for the defense, which is this: if we deny our happiness, resist our satisfaction, we lessen the importance of real deprivation. We must risk delight. We can do without pleasure, but not delight, not enjoyment. We must have the stubbornness to accept our gladness in the ruthless fairness of this world. To make injustice the only measure of our attention is to praise the devil. We must admit there will be music in spite of everything.
What a perfect note to end the show on, and I'm sure everyone is running out and ordering their copy of the book, 10 Poems for Difficult Times. Roger, where can people connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about not just the books, but also, I understand you have different events and workshops?
Yes, I run writing workshops on themes like this, actually. So again, more specifically on the themes that really concern us from day to day. We use writing for us to explore those themes in our own personal lives. So really, these workshops are workshops of self-exploration and self-inquiry. They're all on my website. My website is rogerhousden.com, and you can see what I'm doing there. And you can also contact me if you wish. There's a contact email there on that website, so that's the way to go.
Well, I'm part of your community. I highly suggest everyone become part of your community too, and also pick up 10 Poems for Difficult Times. And Roger, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Great pleasure, really. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Roger. It's been such a joy to spend this time with you and, of course, to talk about your book, 10 Poems for Difficult Times. Again, you can reach Roger at his website at Roger, his last name is spelled HOUSDEN.com. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Thursday, Friday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.